Hey listeners, if you haven't already, join the family by subscribing so you never miss another one of these stories. Let's get to 1,000 subs together. Now relax and enjoy. It all started with a flyer tucked under my windshield wiper, one of those thick cardstock ones that feels expensive, the kind you don't just throw away. It was blank except for a symbol, a spiral that seemed to twist inward forever if you looked at it too long, and an address with a time, 8 p.m. that night. The address was for a warehouse on the industrial side of town, a place I'd only ever seen from the highway, its windows dark and gaping. I have no good reason for why I went. Boredom, maybe. A life that had become a flat gray line. Curiosity, definitely. The kind that doesn't feel healthy but pulls at you anyway. The warehouse door was unlocked, a heavy metal thing that groaned like a living creature when I pushed it open. The space inside was vast and mostly dark, lit only by a circle of candles in the center. A dozen people stood around it, silent, their faces calm and expectant. A man stepped forward. He didn't look like a cult leader. He wore a simple sweater and jeans. His smile was warm, his eyes were clear and intelligent. He didn't give a speech. He just started talking, like we were all old friends catching up. He talked about the noise of the world, the constant pressure, the feeling of being lost in a current you never chose. He spoke about silence, real silence, and the patterns that hide beneath the surface of everything if you only know how to look. He called it the underlying design. It wasn't about gods or demons. It was about structure, about rules that, if followed, would make sense of the chaos. It was the most rational pitch for insanity I'd ever heard. I went back the next night, and the night after that. Within a week, I was given the first rule. The rules were never written down. They were whispered to you, one at a time, when the leaders felt you were ready. The first one was simple. Do not acknowledge the rain on days when the sun is shining. It seemed poetic, almost silly. But the next day was a brilliant, cloudless Tuesday, and as I walked to the bus, a cold, sudden drizzle fell from a clear blue sky. I'd almost laughed, almost pointed it out to the woman next to me waiting for the crosswalk. But I remembered the rule. I kept my mouth shut and my eyes forward. She didn't seem to notice the rain at all. Her hair remained dry. That was the first hook. The first real tug that there was something to this. The second rule was to never have more than 4 of any one thing on a shelf. Books, plates, cans of soup, it didn't matter. An odd number was acceptable, but 4 was the absolute limit. I went home and looked at my bookcase. I had 5 volumes of a history series lined up together. I felt a ridiculous spike of anxiety looking at them. I took the 5th book and put it on the floor. The immediate sense of relief was unsettlingly profound. That's how it worked. The rules felt arbitrary, but following them brought a deep, quiet order to my life. My chronic anxiety, the low-grade hum of dread I'd lived with for years, began to fade. Things started to make a strange kind of sense. I slept through the night for the first time in a decade. The group became my family. We had a shared purpose, a shared language of unspoken acknowledgments. We'd meet at the warehouse, which we called the quiet place, and we would just sit in silence for hours, listening to the underlying design. I never heard anything, not with my ears, but I felt it. A vibration, a pattern falling into place. It was peace. It was belonging. The rules got more specific. I was told to never look at my own reflection in a darkened window. I was told to always leave a bowl of water by my front door overnight and to empty it into the earth before sunrise, never down the drain. I was told that if I ever heard a sound like 3 quick knocks followed by a slow scrape, I was to immediately stop what I was doing and hold my breath until I heard a bird sing. If no bird sang within 1 minute, I was to go to the quiet place, no matter the hour. These instructions should have felt crazy, but by the time I received them, they felt like the most important truths I had ever learned. The world outside our group began to look messy, loud, and foolish. They were living without the rules, drowning in the chaos, and they didn't even know it. We were the awake ones. We were the ones who knew how to listen. The man who had welcomed me, whose name was Elias, took a special interest in me. He said I had a natural talent for hearing the design. He invited me to smaller, private gatherings at his home. It was there I learned about the deeper work. The rules weren't just for us, he explained. They were stitches holding reality together. Our obedience maintained a balance. Every time we left a bowl of water out, we were preventing a little patch of reality from thinning. Every time we avoided a reflection, we were denying something on the other side a chance to look back. He never said what that something was. He didn't need to. The fear was its own proof. The most important rule, the one that Elias said was only for the most dedicated, was the rule of the guest. Once a month, on the night of the new moon, a guest would arrive. We were to leave our back door unlocked. We were to prepare a meal of plain, unseasoned chicken, white rice, and water. We were to set 2 places at the table. We were to eat without looking up from our plates. We were not to speak. We were to listen. After the meal, we were to go directly to our bedroom and not come out until morning. We were never to look at the guest. The first time was the most terrifying night of my life. I sat at my small kitchen table, my heart hammering against my ribs, and listened as my back door opened. Footsteps, slow and heavy, moved across the linoleum. The chair opposite me creaked as weight settled into it. I could feel a presence there, a coldness that radiated from that side of the table. I kept my eyes glued to my plate, shoveling the bland food into my mouth, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the fork. I heard the scrape of a plate, the sound of eating. It was a wet, rhythmic sound, like something chewing without lips. I didn't look up. I didn't make a sound. When the meal was finished, the footsteps retreated, the door closed, and I nearly passed out from the release of tension. I stumbled to my room and didn't move until the sun was bright through the blinds. When I went to the kitchen, the guest's plate and glass were spotless, as if they had been washed and put away. My own plate was still there, crumbs and all. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. I had passed a test. I had helped maintain the balance. I told Elias about it the next day, my voice full of pride. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You are one of us now, truly," he said. The next month was easier. The month after that, it was almost routine. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was tempered by a feeling of importance. I was doing something vital. I was part of something bigger. The change happened slowly. The rules began to change for me. Elias said I was evolving, that the design was speaking to me more directly. The rule about the rain changed. Now, I was to not only ignore the sun showers, but I was to stand in them for exactly 1 minute, counting the seconds in my head. The rule about the shelf changed. Now, I could have no more than 2 of any one thing. I had to give away or throw out so much of what I owned. It felt like a purification. My apartment grew sparse, minimalist. It felt clean. The most significant change was the rule about the guest. Elias told me that for the next visit, I was to keep my head down, as always, but I was to pay close attention to the sounds. The design was going to communicate with me through the guest. The night came. I prepared the meal. I set the table. The door opened. The footsteps were the same. The cold presence settled across from me. We began to eat in that terrible silence. And then I heard it. A new sound. A low, quiet humming. It was tuneless, just a single, sustained note that vibrated through the room. It was coming from the guest. As I listened, the note changed, breaking into a pattern. It was a code. A series of long and short hums. It was Morse code. I had learned it as a kid, a forgotten hobby. My mind automatically translated it. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. So's, save our souls. Then it repeated, over and over again, between the sounds of wet chewing. Sows, saws, sows. My blood went cold. This wasn't the underlying design. This was a distress signal, a plea. Every instinct screamed at me to look up, to finally see what was sitting at my table. But years of conditioning, the fear, the rules, they held me in place. My knuckles were white around my fork. I was sweating. The humming continued, desperate, pleading. Sows. The meal felt like it lasted for an eternity. When it was finally over and the footsteps retreated and the door closed, I didn't go to my bedroom. I vomited into the kitchen sink. I had followed the rules, but for the first time, it didn't feel right. It felt like I had ignored a cry for help. The next day, I went to see Elias. I was frantic, confused. I told him what I had heard. His warm smile never faded. He nodded thoughtfully. That is the design testing you, he said. The guest was presenting you with a paradox, a false plea. It was a test of your faith in the rules. To look up would have been to fall for the chaos, to believe the lie. Your obedience has strengthened the pattern immensely. We are all so proud of you. His words were like a balm. Of course, it was a test, and I had passed. The relief was so sweet, I almost cried. I fell back into the routine with a renewed fervor. I was a model member. I was being groomed for leadership, Elias said. I was given more responsibilities, more complex rules to follow. But the seed of doubt, once planted, refused to die. It was a tiny, silent thing in the back of my mind, but it was there. I started to notice little things. The way Elias's eyes would sometimes flicker with something that wasn't warmth when he thought no one was looking. The way some members who had been there for years seemed hollowed out, their smiles a little too wide, their compliance a little too perfect. I started to pay more attention to the world outside the rules. I noticed that on the days we were told to ignore the rain, other people on the streets seemed to notice it. They would put up hoods, open umbrellas. They saw it. We were the ones choosing not to. The next guest night arrived. The knot in my stomach was no longer just fear. It was a churning mix of fear and a terrible, burning curiosity. The ritual was the same. The door opened. The footsteps, the cold, the wet sound of eating. And then the humming started again. But this time, it was different. It was faster, more frantic. The Morse code came rapid fire. Not just saws. It was a longer message. Short, long, short, short. A pause. Long, long, long. A pause. Short, short, long, short. F-L-O-O-R floor. Then it repeated. Floor, floor, floor. My mind was racing. What did that mean? Was it another test? A more complex paradox? The humming changed again, the pattern shifting into a new sequence. Long, short, short, short. Long, short, short, short. Long, short, short, short. 3 times. 3 dashes, 3 dots, 3 dashes. Sows again, but hammer out with a new terrifying urgency. Then back to floor. Saw's floor. Saw's floor. I couldn't take it. The doubt, the fear, the need to know. It broke me. Elias's warnings screamed in my head, but the plea in that humming was too real, too human. Very slowly, against every rule that had been drilled into me, I lifted my eyes from my plate. I looked across the table. The thing sitting there was not human. It was a crude imitation, shaped roughly like a man, but made of what looked like wet, dark clay. It had no face, just a smooth, blank expanse where its features should have been. Its hand, a shapeless lump, was shoveling the plain chicken into a slit that opened and closed in the lower part of its head. The humming was coming from somewhere within its chest, and it was staring right at me, not with eyes, but I knew it was looking. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. The thing stopped eating. The slit in its face sealed shut. The humming stopped. The entire world went silent. Then it raised its other hand and pointed a thick, muddy finger down at the floor beneath our table. It held the pose for a moment, then it stood up. It didn't walk. It simply lost its shape, collapsing into a puddle of black ooze on the floorboards. The puddle slithered across the floor, under the door, and was gone. I don't know how long I sat there. The cold from that thing was still in the room. My food was cold. My body was frozen. Eventually, I moved. My muscles were stiff. I got down on my hands and knees. I looked at the floor where it had pointed. One of the floorboards looked different, newer. I found a knife and pried it up. Underneath, wrapped in a black plastic bag, was a journal. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely open it. The handwriting inside was messy, scrawled in a panic. The first entry was from 5 years ago. It was from a man named David. He wrote about joining the group, about the rules, about the peace it brought. The entries were happy, full of faith. Then, they changed. He wrote about his doubts, small things at first, a nagging feeling that the peace he felt was too perfect, too manufactured. He wrote out the way Elias's eyes would sometimes linger on certain members, a look of appraisal that felt less like spiritual guidance and more like a farmer sizing up livestock. The entries grew more frantic, the handwriting looser, as he detailed his plan to break the ultimate rule, to finally look up during the guest's visit, to see what was really sharing his table. He was caught. He didn't say how, but the entry ended mid-sentence, a long smear of ink trailing off the page as if the journal had been ripped from his hands. The next entries were written in a different hand, cold and precise, every letter perfectly formed. It was Elias's writing. He described the process of correction not as a punishment, but as a sacred transformation. He wrote about how David was being remade, how his doubts were being systematically scrubbed away, how his body was being taught to be a better vessel for the silence, a more permanent home for the underlying design. The final entry was in David's hand again, but it was a pathetic, shaky imitation, the letters sprawling and infantile. It contained only one sentence, written over and over until the pen tore through the paper in a spatter of desperate ink. It is not a guest, it is a cage. It is not a guest, it is a cage. It is not a guest, it is a cage. The thing I had seen wasn't some outer monster. It was David, or what was left of him. The humming, the sows, the desperate message. It was him, trapped inside that thing, still conscious, still screaming into the void of his own form. The rules weren't maintaining reality. They were maintaining a prison, a system of control designed to break us down, to make us pliable, to prepare us for our own eventual remodeling into those silent, shuffling things. The bowl of water by the door wasn't strengthening reality. It was a beacon, weakening the barrier between what I was and what they wanted me to become, making it easier for the influence of the quiet place to seep in. The silence wasn't peace, it was compliance, a voluntary deafness to the screams of those who had come before us. I had not been hearing the underlying design. I had been hearing the hum of the bars of my own cell, a soothing frequency designed to mask the sound of the lock clicking shut. I ran. I left everything. I got in my car and I drove, and I didn't stop for hours, my hands glued to the wheel, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I live in a different city now, a loud, brash place that never gets truly quiet, and I prefer it that way. I change apartments every few months, never leaving a forwarding address, paying in cash whenever I can. I try to break the rules. I keep 6 of everything on my shelves. I stare at my reflection in every dark window I pass, challenging whatever might be looking back. But it's hard. The conditioning is deep, a set of grooves worn into my mind. Sometimes I catch myself counting items on a store shelf, feeling a spike of pure, undiluted panic if I see a group of 5, my hand almost twitching to remove one. Sometimes, on a perfectly sunny day, I feel a phantom drizzle on my skin, and I have to physically fight the urge to stop dead on the sidewalk and count to 60, my throat tightening with a fear I can't logically explain. And every new moon, no matter where I am, no matter how exhausted I am, I wake up at 3 a.m. to the sound of 3 quick knocks and a slow scrape, a sound that exists only for me in the deep silence of my room. I never hear a bird sing afterwards. I just lie there, holding my breath in the dark, waiting for a morning that feels a little less real, a little more fragile, every time it comes. I know they're looking for me. I feel it in the way a stranger might hold my gaze a second too long, or in the wrong car idling outside my building. I know Elias wants his best student back, not to help me, but to finish the job, to complete the vessel he was so carefully crafting. I left the journal under the floorboard. I hope someone else finds it. I hope they are braver than I was, that they look up before it's too late. But part of me knows the rules are too comforting. The silence is too sweet a lure for a world that is so loud and painful. Most people would rather have peace than the terrible, unraveling truth. And the worst part, the thought that haunts me every single day and slithers into my dreams, is that the thing at the table, the thing that was David, wasn't trying to escape. It was pointing to the journal, yes, a warning from a past self, but it was also pointing down, to the foundation of the house, to the foundation of the quiet place itself. It was trying to tell me that the cage isn't just for the guests. The cage is the quiet place. The rules are the bars. The silence is the lock, and we were all already in it.